Honestly, yeah. And it's really unfortunate and really embarrassing and shameful that Asians do crave that proximity to whiteness so badly that we're willing to not be in solidarity with other BIPOC or Black, queer, brown folk. Like, it's... we can always boil things down to like childhood and upbringing, but I like to always say, like, this is what I kind of learned in therapy. Like, once you're an adult and you realize you have free will and you realize you have the agency to unlearn, relearn, like unpack and discover life, that you start to realize how fucked up it is that we want that and we crave that proximity to whiteness. Like, I will say that is oftentimes with a lot of Asian Americans that I meet, East Asian Americans specifically where I'm speaking from, but like in my experience, I questioned this at such a young age, and I think that's because I didn't grow up in I grew up in a predominantly white space, but then when my parents got divorced, we ended up moving to like a lower income area, and I went to school with primarily Black and brown and like Hispanic folk, and everything changed when I was around other people of color, honestly. Like, when I was just around white people, I did want to like look white, feel white, act white, and like, you know, everyone back then, I remember Twinkie was a thing. And then when I moved to like the different neighborhoods, and also then I moved to LA because I'm from DC, and then I like moved my life over here, and I have not gone back to the East Coast. I'm never gonna live on the East Coast again unless it's like New York or like possibly Miami, but I want my Spanish to get better first. But it's our responsibility as a community to be better and to do better. And I oftentimes find it so disheartening and so disappointing in my own community. Like, let's just recap this year alone. Like, Kevin and his goddamn blackface, the purple YSL blush situation, and all these Asian creators felt like they had so much fucking right to say it's a brightener. But no, it's a fucking blush. Yes, you can use it as a brightener, but that's not how it was marketed, and they missed the whole fucking point with what other Black creators were saying. The Euphoria Foundation, oh my God, I just spit. The fucking UTI podcast, Esther, like, and I honestly think this is like a kind of like a direct contrast in Asian Americans, like, their stereotype growing up. I remember everyone always thought that I was supposed to be so smart because I was Asian, and I was just born with these genes for math, but I'm fucking dyslexic and I have ADHD and other neurodiversities that I don't really care to qualify on here or like to surmise on here. But like, I think the contrast of us being this stereotype of like smart, academic, overachievers has now, we've like slid into like the opposite end of like boba, raving, ABG culture, and like, and even then ABG culture, like, they don't, like, a lot of people who reference themselves as ABGs, or like people who say they want an ABG baddie, they don't even know where that like term comes from originally, and it has like a dark not a dark history, but it had kind of but yeah, I don't know. Whenever I read comments like this, it makes me so freaking sad, because like for me, I don't identify with this craving of whiteness. I live in the Bay Area, and it's like a predominantly Asian place, and white place. But I remember 10 years ago, this was like a much more diverse community. But I adamantly stay away from the marina. I don't go to North Beach. I stay in the Mission. I stay in the Castro. I stay in San Jose and Oakland. Like, I'd rather die than be pregnant, and I also rather die than go to the marina. Like, I don't know what else to say with that, but yeah. I just want the community to be better. And we're so stuck in our own politics because all of us, the only thing we care about is fucking representation for some reason, as like the pinnacle hallmark of anti-racism against Asians in this country. But I digress. Asian Americans need to do better. That's why I started my decentering whiteness thing in the first place. But now everyone's just commenting Oxford study, Piccolo study, fucking mail truck study. I don't know. There are mail trucks in front of me, but it's really hard to like be Asian and exist to do the work to unpack, because people still are going to accuse us of siding with the whites or siding with whiteness. I don't know where I was going with this video. This ended up turning into a rant. If you made it this far, I don't know what to tell you. Go watch Arcane.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, Africans. I hope you're faring well where you are, and if you're not faring well, please fare well where you are. There's a problem, a very huge problem, and I won't keep quiet, and I just won't go silent. You know, it might seem something normal, but it shouldn't be. Many times I have spoken countless times about colorism. Colorism is a problem, and it's really a problem affecting us. And if we don't silence this problem as early as possible, it will affect our children. It will affect the next coming generation, you know. So, colorism is not only subjected to Africans or black people. No. I recently made a video about an Indian man who is dating a white woman, and they were celebrating a birthday. So the Indian man was being banished by the netizens because he had a darker complexion than her white girlfriend. You know, that's the society we are living in today. A society that values color than moral values. And you see, this is a problem. It's a very, very big problem, you know. We don't care about your behaviors, we care about your complexion. It's as if we can say, if you are dark, you have bad manners. If you're white, you have good manners. But you know, you can't judge things by looking at them that way. You need to experience them. For this reason, I went ahead and found a video of a Japanese lady, right? She's speaking the same thing I'm telling you right now, that the Asians, not blacks, the Asians are chasing proximity to whiteness. And that's a very big problem, chasing proximity to whiteness, you know. I want us to listen to her, get to understand the root cause of this, and then I shall come back by the end of the video where we shall also have a deep critical analysis.
There's an ongoing joke that half white, half Asian children tend to have an Asian mom and a white dad. And I thought it was really interesting that there was a phenomenon in the mid to late 1800s to the mid 1900s where that trend was actually the opposite, and there were a lot of children born to Irish mothers, specifically Irish, and Chinese fathers. Part of this had to do with there were Chinese students coming to America to go to schools like Harvard and Yale since the 1800s, which I literally can't even imagine. Like, we are always like given this image that like Asians haven't been in this country for that long, and if they were only here for like temporary labor. But there were people who came to this country for education 200 years ago. Sorry, maybe almost 200 years ago, because it was towards the later half of the 1800s. And the children born between the relationships with these Chinese men who came over to America with Irish women were subject to a lot of fear and apprehension. Here's one cartoon image where it's like supposed to depict an Irish woman talking to her half Chinese children and using some kind of like pidgin English, and is like, "Oh my god, run home to your pappy, we've got some puppy pie left over." Like, for dog eating? Was that early? That's crazy. The term half caste came from colonial India, where children born between British parents and Indian parents were called half caste in a derogatory way. But there were also instances of this fear of miscegenation between Anglo-Saxons and Asians, particularly Chinese and Japanese, due to the prevalence of their populations in America compared to other Asian ethnicities. And in these instances, they would call them a mongrel breed, because they were likening them to dogs and lesser than. And part of the fear of Asian immigration at this time had to do with the banning of transatlantic slave trade, which they feared that because they could no longer bring people in from Africa, that now Asians would replace them as the cheap labor, and maybe they wouldn't be enslaved, but it would be a threat to white laborers because they would be able to do the job faster and for cheaper. Meanwhile, at this time as well, there were European incursions into China for the first time. I think what we often forget is that for a lot of Asian history, at least like East and Southeast Asian, there is this notion of Sinocentrism, where China is the center of the world. It literally comes from the name, 诸国, which is like center of the universe. And so at this time, China's facing a reckoning of realizing, hey, maybe we're not the center of the universe and all powerful because we've literally lost 2 wars to the British because they fed opium into our population, and now they're demanding all sorts of territorial and monetary demands. And then this kind of goes into intellectual history, but the ideas of social Darwinism didn't stay just in Europe, and people did translate those and learn about them in other continents. So in China, at least, there were a few thinkers who would look at that social Darwinism and that placed white people at the top and were worried about China's place underneath. They're like, okay, so we're not the whites at the top, but we don't want to be treated the same way that they treat darker. I can't do finger quotes at this hand, but they would be scared about them being treated the same way as the darker races, and so therefore they worked on trying to approximate themselves towards whiteness and thereby avoid that same level of harsh treatment. Some people actually believed that they could use eugenics to this means, where they would advocate intermarriage between Chinese men and white women, so that the lower class of the white woman that would usually marry lower class white women would counterbalance the lower racial status of the Chinese husband. So it would be wealthy, intellectual Chinese men who they tried to get to marry lower class white women, so that they two would balance each other out and they would be able to have children born from that, which would be supposedly carrying the benefits of both races, which would do like the out balance between like the harsher character of Russians with the gentle disposition of Chinese, apparently, according to one person. And interestingly, this guy Zhang, hold on, let me find his first name. Okay, his name was Zhang Jingchen, and ironically, he was called Doctor of Sex because the way he would advocate for intermixing of Asian and white populations to create the ideal person. That eugenics. But yeah, he accepted intermarriage between Chinese men and women of color, but rejected, the quote, in turning to the question of non-white races, Zhang accepts intermarriage between Chinese men and women of color, but definitively rejects the idea of Chinese women, quote, lowering themselves, unquote, by marrying men of darker races. This gendered double standard derives from the patriarchal notion that a woman's status follows that of her husband. So as early as the 1800s, we can see Asians disidentifying with the quote darker races in order to try to find proximity to whiteness. And this idea of what this author, I'm looking at the book Eurasians by Emma Jinhua Teng, which she calls the yellow-white proximity. And so because Chinese racial identity is somewhere between not white and like white, then they try to get themselves closer to whiteness in order to receive better treatment. And in order to become more proximate to whiteness, they would have to disidentify with other people of color. Now, aside from the eugenics, I also find that really interesting because you see that in the history in Asian America, where Asian Americans were somewhere between not white and not black, because America has a very strong racial dichotomy of a binary white and black. And early in Asian American history, with coming over with coolie laborers in the late 1700s and the 1800s, then you definitely see Asians being depicted as not white and therefore a threat and a fear, and you see all sorts of racist propaganda because of that. But towards the 1900s, and definitely after the World War II, you see more of a definition of Asians from not white to being, more importantly, not black, and that enabled them to demand more equal treatment to whites than compared to Black Americans. And that was even used as an argument in the late 1800s as to why Chinese children in America should be allowed to go to school with the white children rather than the black children, because they would argue, our children might not be white, but they're not black. Therefore, yeah, it's really messed up. But I think it's important to acknowledge this part of our history as well. Like, there's a clear reason why, despite having a lot of parallels with Latin Americans and Black Americans in experiences, Asian Americans are regarded as the outlier in terms of people of color in America. And a lot of that has to do with our own community's disidentification with these other groups and choosing to try to pursue proximity toward whiteness. And that doesn't really work, because no matter what, at the end of the day, you're still not white and you're still not going to be treated as equal. And that's not to say there weren't outliers. There's plenty of Asian Americans who do identify with other people of color and find solidarity in that. There were even Asians in Asia who identified more with Black Americans than they did with white Americans. But across the board, it would be willfully ignorant of me to deny that this is an aspect of our history. And it's one that I really hope we'll see change coming forward, because even though there was just the overturning of affirmative action, which most Asian Americans did support affirmative action, they just found some random Chinese Canadian dude to like sue for it. I'm hoping that seeing that affirmative action has actually, like, with overturning it, has seen a downturn in Asian enrollment. I'm hoping that this will be like a wake-up call to the community, and maybe more people will start to realize that at the end of the day, they don't want Asians. They don't want any people of color, but at least when you have affirmative action, they can't legally, like, not accept any. I don't know, I don't feel like I was that well spoken in this video, but I had like a massive migraine yesterday, and I'm like not feeling that great, but yeah.
Colorism is a psychological problem. A psychological problem that manifests as colorism, you know? The reason why I'm saying it's more of a psychological effect, it's because it doesn't have any, it really doesn't have any other reason why it exists. It's a result of lower self-esteem and hate for oneself, you know? People who hate themselves are people who will experience this kind of a problem, you know? This is the problem. Colorism in itself was created because people, after being colonized, after a very long period of time, after being colonized, after a very, very long period of time, they were told so many times that the colonizer, who was the slave master, was superior to them, you know? That is what they were told. So they believe that if you want to become superior, you must be close. You must resemble the slave master or the colonizer, you know? And people fall to this trick. They fall to this deception because they lack knowledge. If someone just had the right knowledge of their own history, of their own self, and of their own origin, their problems they would escape. There are problems that they wouldn't have to go through, you know? Because one of the things I say that tells me that they lack knowledge is because God in himself, I believe the religious text, Judaism and Christianity, I mean the Holy Bible, this is the highest form of morality, the highest form of learning, the highest form of governance, the highest form of discipleship and leadership can be found in that holy text. Because it says very well, he made us in his own image and likeness, you know, and he does not favor anyone. Even the Israelites, he tells them, do not undermine those Gentiles. Don't think that you are special above them, you know. I created you equal and you are all equal. Don't be arrogant, or else what you saw me doing to the Philistines or to the Assyrians, I shall do them to you, you know. That is God warning the Israelites, whom he calls his chosen ones, you know. It tells you one thing: the Creator does not judge his creations. It is the creations that judge themselves. You understand? It is the creations that judge themselves. Here I am, and I am looking at the black Americans. I'm looking at the Indians. I'm looking at the Africans. I'm looking at the Asians, right? Anyone who has fallen short to this deception, it is truth that they lack. They lack the understanding. The media has portrayed false identity, false image, false narration, you know. Some of the people we call celebrities are used to fuel these stereotypes. Even the people, everywhere you go, you find that people who are working in a particular space are having a particular kind of skin tone. That communicates a certain kind of narrative. A narrative that this color is what is expected, but this other color is not, you know. Once we stop categorizing people based on their skin color and start categorizing people based on their criteria and based on their importance, you know, their education, their learnedness, that is when we are going to get things right. But if we don't, I'm telling you, it is going to be bad. And it's going to be so bad to us, the minority of the population. You know, black people and Asians might be the minority in America, but once we stick to our own values and we know our identity, nobody, and I repeat, nobody can ever tell us otherwise, because you know who you are. And the chances are, if you don't know who you are, chances are you'll always lose yourself. Anything someone tells you, you will believe. Just stand firm and believe in your own self, and you will see the change.